was. Coming up in this episode, they caught the perpetrators very quickly and the ringleader got life imprisonment. Nice to meet you, Pablo.
He wrote me a letter the day that he was actually in an accident that took his life, and he was on a motorcycle.
Should be easy, done it before. Hey, what do you want?
Yeah?
Rip your...
Hey Michael, how much did your bike cost?
$1,000.
Where did you buy it?
Mexico, Campeche.
How about this AC/DC themed bike? Check out the chain license plate frame and the cutting-edge rear mudguard. So I'm in the South Pacific Chilean port city of Valparaiso, which means Paradise Valley, and staying at the Villa Kunterbunt, a hostel catering exclusively to bikers and travellers. As I said in a previous episode, I was very worried because my dad was about to undergo emergency cancer surgery. So the first thing I did was ask if I could change my ticket. But with Easter coming up, it didn't look good. And then when I got this email, no way, Jose, were they going to let me change my ticket. And I still don't have a credit card to buy a brand new ticket. So I decided to just wait for news from home. I still had a problem with the bike. It had 7 spokes that were thinner than original, posing a risk of collapse. I needed to find spare spokes as soon as possible. Enzo suggested an area on the other side of Valparaiso where all the bike shops were located, so I walked over there. They certainly had a sense of humour, and they worked on all sorts of bikes, and custom bike builds were not unknown. I asked at several shops, but they all looked puzzled when I said I had a Ronco demolition, and shook their heads when I showed them a sample spoke. Back in Villa Kunterbunt, Martina said I might have more luck over at Viña del Mar, an adjacent barrio, so I caught a bus over there and found one place that had thicker spokes from a Japanese bike, but they needed machining and they only had 3 of them. They said they would try and find a full set, but when I called them later, they said they couldn't get them in less than 4 weeks. On the way back, I saw this cyclist and his best friend. Now there's an impressive amount of weight supported by his spokes. Anyhow, I did a bit of research on the internet and found a recommended workshop in Santiago, the capital, a bit over 100 kilometres away. Bussing it there, we passed a place called Viña Indomita. I thought it looked like a modern church, but it was actually a famous vineyard. In Santiago, a bit of hunting around, I was able to find the workshop where a Senor Aladino seemed to run a very reputable bike shop. I showed him some sample spokes and he said he could modify some thicker gauge spokes off a big Japanese bike which would be twice as strong. In fact, he said he had some from a 650 Japanese bike that could be modified to fit. So I left and returned to Villa Kunterbunt feeling like I could finally rest easy. I have found a solution. Except I couldn't rest easy. Because in the middle of the night, there was a 5.3 earthquake centered right here in the Valparaiso region. And just a few days later, one rated at 7.1 on the Richter scale also struck. My room in Villa Kunterbunt, it had plenty of cracks in the adobe walls, evidence of previous earthquakes and tremors, as the west coast of South America is one of the most seismologically active regions in the world. In fact, the first and third most violent earthquakes recorded in modern times occurred in Chile, and the third one, in 1730, was centered right here in Valparaiso. The geological reasons for this are unique in the world. This really interesting book I once read by British geologist Simon Lamb explains some of the quite amazing processes that led to the formation or orogeny of the South American Andes. One reason is the Nazca Plate, which is the tectonic plate under the Pacific, is moving slightly north of east at a rate of about 3 inches per year. Now this plate gets pushed under the adjacent plate in a process called subduction. The mountains that ride over the top rise higher as the adjacent continental plate dips lower. But the Andes, especially the central Andes, rise higher than normal, bulging in effect. It is thought because there is no river sediment at the ocean floor to lubricate the friction occurring between the 2 tectonic plates. The Atacama receives virtually no rain and its rivers are very short anyhow, so relatively little silt builds up on the ocean floor to lubricate these tectonic plates. That is why the central Andes, home to the Atacama Desert, are higher and wider than the northern or southern Andes. And the Atacama's lack of rain itself owes its existence to the cold Humboldt current flowing up from Antarctica in a trench more or less formed by these colliding plates. So at the end of the day, you can in effect argue that meteorological phenomena like ocean temperature and rainfall have built up the Bolivian altiplano. Now this lack of silt and therefore lubricant probably means the earthquakes are less frequent but have time to build up more destructive energy to be released when the plates finally do slip. In fact, evidence has been recently published that a huge 9.5 magnitude earthquake struck the Atacama region 3,800 years ago. Now, it doesn't only push up the mountains, it also pushes down the ocean floor. If you look at a topographical map, you'll see that the widest part of the Altiplano roughly aligns with the direction of the Nazca Plate pushing northeast. But the depths of the ocean here, too, are much deeper than further north or south, over 8,000 metres in some places. Now, Valparaiso is no longer in the Atacama region, yet it gets massive earthquakes, and the highest mountain in the Americas, Mount Aconcagua, is very close by. So how can you explain that? Well, they roughly align with a chain of islands called the Juan Fernández Islands. Here it is proposed a different process augments the tectonic processes as the Nazca Plate passes over a geological hotspot that disrupt the normal mountain building process. There is also a microplate called the Juan Fernandez Microplate, which would be a contributing factor to earthquakes and lifting that massive giant mountain, Mount Aconcagua, as well. Anyhow, back to my bike. I decided it would be easier to take the wheel off and take it to Senor Aladino than ride my bike through all the traffic in the capital. So I unmounted the wheel, wrapped it in a woven plastic wheat sack and headed back to Santiago. Another long bus trip to the capital, but this time it was a bit quicker to find it because I'd marked the position on my little Holux GPS and used that to walk straight there. And there, entrusting the whole wheel to Senor Aladino, he assured me it would be ready in 3 working days. Walking back around Santiago, I saw a few interesting things, like this bike trail I set up. It looked bespoke, but I bet it cost next to nothing to make. The hitch connection looked a bit dodgy though. How about this AC/DC themed bike? Check out the chain license plate frame and the cutting edge rear mudguard. Speaking of cutting edge, this lady was selling a vegetable dicer. Here was one of her cucumber creations. You see police everywhere in Santiago. These ones are riding scooters. This poster is against a proposed new anti-street march law called the Hinz-Peter Law. The sponsor of the proposed law was the Chilean Interior Minister Rodrigo Hinz-Peter. Hinz-Peter was a lawyer who was descended from German, Austrian, Jewish ancestors. The Hinz-Peter law was never passed, but sometime later he was targeted with a parcel bomb, which luckily didn't kill him. These posters promoted, from left to right, the right to housing, the political ideas of Augusto Sandino, and a music festival called Weedland. Something for everyone, I guess. But if I needed a reminder that Chile was not that tolerant at that time, then I found it when I saw a lot of banners, posters and reporters gathered outside a hospital. They were calling for justice for someone called Daniel Zamudio. When I got back to Valparaiso, I put the name Daniel Zamudio into the internet and I was saddened and shocked what I read. He was a 24-year-old gay man who'd been set upon in a park in Santiago by a bunch of Chilean neo-Nazis. They bashed him, cut part of his ear off, broke his leg, burnt him with cigarettes, and carved what appeared to be swastikas into his skin. The newspaper said he'd been in a coma for 23 days and they were about to switch the machine off. And in fact, he died the very next day. The only good news that came out of that tragic story was they caught the perpetrators very quickly and the ringleader got life imprisonment, and Chile eventually passed laws that protected gay people and criminalised violence against them. I heard from Enzo one of the local attractions here is a house called La Sebastiana, now a museum dedicated to its former owner, the poet and politician Pablo Neruda. Enzo said it was too far to walk. In fact, he wasn't a fan at all of Neruda. He said he was a communist with a gold credit card. The world needs money to function, he said. Many of these leftists are fakes living in luxury off the backs of the masses. That was his forthright opinion. Still, I wanted to go and check it out, and I'm glad I did, as I saw so many interesting things along the way. I mean, the only way to get to know a city is to walk around it. The first thing I saw was this quaint pharmacy. So rustic looking, reminiscent of something from 1930s. Look at the way they shelved their products at the back there. Down the ascensor, artilleria once again, and I came to an old-style barber shop. He certainly looks like he's not under much stress. Next, I saw some rubble, which initially I attributed to the devastating 8.8 earthquake 2 years previous. It was called the Palacio Subercasal, built in 1895 by a wealthy businessman of the same name. It looks like they wanted to shore up the facade and at least stop it from further deterioration. Then I saw this plaque, which said a tragedy occurred in 2007. So actually the building wasn't destroyed by an earthquake. It was destroyed by a gas explosion and subsequent fire back in 2007. Ironically, the original architect was also bombero, which means fireman in Spanish. I decided to shoot this quick panorama, which turned out okay, I guess. Coming into the main plaza, I saw how architects like to cement their names for posterity, if you pardon the pun. This is actually the Hotel Reina Victoria, or the Queen Victoria Hotel. It's adjacent this beautiful grey building, which is the naval headquarters. Valparaiso is not only home to the Chilean Navy, but also there is a huge merchant navy presence here. So there were plenty of bars like this catering to lonely seamen. Now, contrast this dowdy dive to the next building, housing the El Mercurio newspaper, which has been in business since 1827, making it the oldest continuously published Spanish-language newspaper in the world. But look at those paint bomb stains on the second floor. It looks like it has been the target of a few street protests in the past. The next bar looked to have some interesting political connotations: Simon Bolivar and indigenous rights. Then this lovely fountain and statue to Lord Cochrane, a Scottish naval commander who, after distinguishing himself in the Napoleonic Wars, sold his services to the Chileans as a kind of maritime mercenary, which saw the Chileans trounce the Spanish. In the UK, however, he was convicted of stock exchange fraud, but later pardoned by Queen Victoria and made a rear admiral. Next, I came to the Galleria Hotel Prat. Now, before you laugh, Prat is a Catalan surname. Doesn't mean what it means in English. Prat was another Chilean naval hero. In 1879, Chile and Peru were at war. The Peruvians, led by Admiral Grau, had an ironclad monitor called the Huascar. Prat commanded the Esmeralda. Both ships were built in the UK, but the Huascar had about 50% more horsepower. After a battle that lasted more than 3 hours, Grau decided to use the Huascar to repeatedly ram the wooden-hulled Esmeralda. Pratt could see the battle was lost and led a charge of his sailors onto the Huascar. On board the Huascar, he was immediately shot dead in the head, and the Esmeralda sank. Why did he do such a suicidal thing? Well, like many people in that era, he was a spiritualist. He believed in talking to deceased relatives through mediums, and he probably thought he would live to fight another day. He believed in reincarnation. Here I took a wrong turn and had to backtrack a bit, but pretty soon I came to an area called Cielo Abierto, the open sky, and the buildings were blue. Look how colourful they are. You start to appreciate that it has its own rustic style, the architecture here in Valparaiso, like this shop front. And they use corrugated iron a lot, not on the roof, but on the walls, like this green building. It's actually quite pleasing to the eye, in my opinion. These last few 100 metres are up a steep hill, and I'm getting close now, but not before seeing something that proves that Valparaiso people do have a pretty good sense of humour. Finally, I'm at my destination, La Sebastiana, Pablo Neruda's house. It's a Chilean national monument. It does bear a resemblance to the bridge of a ship. Unfortunately, photography was prohibited inside the house, so I can't show you anything like that, but I can summarise his life. One thing, there was great views from all his windows up there, of the whole bay. That would make up for the 13 months he spent in hiding in basements, because he was a wanted communist. His real name was Ricardo Reis, but he started using pen names at age 13 because his father disapproved of his writing poetry. Later in life, he was a communist senator and a diplomat. At one point after World War II, an arrest warrant was issued and he fled over the Andes Mountains on horseback to Argentina before travelling to Europe and Asia using a false passport of another poet. After a peripatetic wandering of Europe and Asia, in 1971, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. By that time, he had returned to Chile and was an advisor to President Allende, but 12 days after Pinochet snatched power and Allende suicided, Neruda died in very suspicious circumstances, and his polemic ghost still haunts Chile to this day. Nice to meet you, Pablo. Just a few blocks walk from the Villa Kunterbunt, there was a breathtaking lookout over the entire bay, the working harbour and the Chilean naval base. Valparaiso is effectively the port that serves Santiago, Chile's capital, about 100 kilometres east. This station is on a hill called Artilleria, or Artillery Hill, but there is another attraction right here. These quaint funicular cable cars called asensores. Would you believe, despite the gaudy paint job, this one dates back more than 100 years to the year 1892. And it's not even the oldest one still functioning in Valparaiso. One of the others dates from 1883. You see there that black and yellow sign says danger, high voltage. Gee, it comes to a gentle stop. See, on the roof there, it's got Jesus on the left and I guess the Virgin Mary on the right. But that carriage appears to have like a half angel, half mermaid kind of creature painted on it. One day it looked like it was undergoing repairs. Wonder what that black figure painted on the side represents. I don't think it's an angel. I hope for that guy's sake the brakes are well and truly locked on. Looks like it has two pretty thick cables, one as a backup maybe. Pretty soon its wheels were turning again. Ironically, the plaza at the bottom down there has an English name, Plaza Wheelwright, named after William Wheelwright, an American shipping and railroad baron from Massachusetts. So I ended up riding the ascensor from the bottom station in Plaza Wheelwright. I just noticed something. Those eyes are left and right, and they align momentarily just about now. Okay, time to hop aboard. Beautiful period woodwork here, carriage work. I wonder if that yellow rail is some sort of safety cog brake or something to catch, or something to stop it falling backwards if the cable breaks. Don't know. It's not often you get to ride on a transportation that dates back to the century before last. It takes about 2 minutes to ascend or descend. This one was initially a single rail, but 16 years later they constructed a second rail to double capacity and meet demand. Wow, even the turnstiles are antique. Look at that. Made in London in 1887. From up here you have a bird's eye view of nearly the entire bay and city. And the thought dawned on me, what a great place for a gigapan. So I set up my apparatus and I shot a gigapan, but the moving cranes and the bobbing up and down of boats kind of wrecked it. It turned out all right, I guess. You can see these guys working here. Hey, check out that old bus down there. Looks like it's an electric trolley bus. It looks like they get their power from overhead catenary cables. It seems old-fashioned never goes out of fashion here in Valparaiso. I reckon they're good. As they are electric, they don't pump out exhaust fumes, and they're fairly silent. Apparently they were made in the USA by the Pullman Company, and the oldest ones were built in 1946. Some of them saw service in Switzerland and Santiago, the capital, before coming here. Originally they were state-run and then privately run, and a couple of times when the trolley bus service stopped due to bankruptcy or strikes, the people complained so much that the government found ways to keep the service running, and now they are a national treasure. Sometimes those conducting rods jump off the catenaries and the bus comes to a grinding halt. But one day I saw that happen and the driver jumped out of his bus and with a long insulated pole pushed them back into contact, It looked like he'd done it many times before. Simple technology, it works, and they're quaint and rustic, and I like it. Now, this one here is pretty special because it is actually one of the oldest still running in the world. This one has number 859, so it's one of the originals from 1946 to 1948 that first operated in Santiago. This one looks like he's broken down. The electric engine is not that big. And the electrics are vintage. But they do the job, and I reckon they would be easy to repair. And just as I was thinking, well, they're nice to look at, but maybe they're unreliable and break down a lot, I saw this 2-bus traffic jam. But what's going on here? I thought the modern internal combustion engine bus was going to tow the electric trolley bus. But this 60-year-old electric trolley bus is the one that's moving. Is it a push start? It is! And it was able to clutch start it. The old trolley bus saves the day. Near the top of the ascensor artilleria platform, there was this beautiful blue wooden building called Cuatro Vientos, the Four Winds. It was a bar, restaurant, cafe, had a beautiful sweeping view. I would have loved to have gone in there and had a meal, but my credit card still hasn't arrived, so I have to conserve my cash. Still, I was happy to just enjoy this view from the free lookout here. Valparaiso is roughly the same latitude as Sydney, Australia, and as I said in a previous episode, many broodmares were exported from Valparaiso to Australia, and it's thought that one of these shipments introduced a noxious weed that farmers have been cursing ever since, called the Bathurst burr. It originates here in South America. The seeds probably went over in the tails of one of those horses. During Australia's gold rush, there was a lot of wheat exported from Valparaiso. Australia couldn't feed itself with wheat because all the farmers had taken off to the gold fields, and Chile stepped in and for many decades supplied Australia and California, apparently, with shipments of wheat. Valparaiso is rich in art, and not just paintings. It's in their signage. Signs here are interesting. Can't tell whether they're graffiti or posters. This sign says the establishment is not apt for smokers. This one says smokers are welcome. This one promotes an international poetry festival entitled Grito de Mujer, or Cry of the Woman. This restaurant has the name The Power of God. This is interesting. It appears to be English. I'm really starting to like Valparaiso. I didn't expect it to be so full of character. Today the two goofy dogs don't want to play. Probably used all their energy chewing up the guests' screwdrivers. Finally, I went back to Santiago, where I found Aladino had done an excellent job respoking my wheel, and it even came with a 1-year guarantee. They certainly look thicker and stronger. Gracias, Aladino. I'll keep these old ones as spares. Note they seem to be different designs on the heads of these things. I don't know. Near the Santiago bus station, I saw this aluminium-bodied vintage race car. And there was a Chilean walk of fame, but I only recognised one of the names, Ricky Arjona, and only because I'd lived in Colombia. Some graffiti is decipherable. This one's asking for education to be free, but the one underneath, I don't really get it, even if it is in English. Okay, time to get this wheel back on. Should be easy, done it before. Hey, what do you want? Should be easy. What's this spacer left over?
Does that side... I think I have to consult.
Got it. Done like a dinner. Yay! Because the owner, Martina, was German, there seemed to be a lot of German travellers at this hostel. The day after I arrived, this German couple, Claudia and Werner, set off. They formerly worked in Alice Springs to save money for this trip. They weren't heading south, they said, because it was too cold. And they are German. Of course, they were both riding BMWs. Auf Wiedersehen! Yet another German guy staying at Villa Kunterbunt was this guy, Kendi. He was riding a BMW, of course, and what caught my attention were two things he had on his bike. One, he had an old wristwatch as a sort of timekeeper clock on his handlebars, which is a very good aid to navigation and planning. And the other thing was this wooden-handled thing with leather strips, and it was a whip.
That whip you have, what's it for?
It's
for the dogs.
What dogs?
For dogs.
Dogs attack you in the tent? Yeah.
That's it. I'm camper by kappa.
Yeah.
Problem for dogs and the food. I'm cooking. Dog.
Yeah.
Rip you.
And it works.
For the dogs. It's finished.
But Kendi wasn't the only German-speaking BMW rider here. In the side passage, there were two bright yellow BMWs, and they were owned by Katja and Jens Wheat. They were in the middle of a world tour, and they had been featured in dozens of magazine articles in Germany.
Are they symmetrical?
Show us.
Easy.
From IKEA.
Yes.
And if you're wondering what all the fuss is about these ready-to-assemble camping chairs, they do have one feature that makes them unique.
Is the customizing
Hast du einen kaufen?
in the price of
Wo?
the,
Geschenkt bekommen. Hast heute gekommen.
embroidery?
Alles kommen heute. Ich warte auf die Weihnachten.
If it sounds like nearly everybody speaking German, that's true, because another German couple, Nicole and Christian, arrived in a Land Rover and they'd met up on the road earlier with the other Germans. It was like one big happy family. I'd even met them up in Arica when we had the problem with the landmines on the road. I'm starting to realise that the biking fraternity, you meet someone, there's a big chance you might meet them again later on. In that respect, it's a bit of a small world. Another German is this guy here, Herbert Bain, a retired banker like my dad, but unlike my dad, riding a 1995 BMW R100 GSPD, and to prove that age is no barrier, he was 60 years old and his wife was the pillion passenger on the back. Sometimes I felt a bit left out with all these German speakers. They could all speak English, but of course they preferred to speak German. But I could always talk to the man standing next to Herbert here, Irishman Connor Maloney, who's riding from the northeast of the USA on his Suzuki V-Strom on his way to Patagonia as well. I got along with him pretty well because he's a former English teacher too, and he taught English in Spain for a while. Here are his panniers, which he said saves him having to explain everything in bad Spanish. And here he is leaving Villa Kunterbunt with an escort of barking dogs.
Enzo, gracias por todo. De nada, señora, hasta la próxima.
And then there's Michael, a young Swiss rider who arrived on a 150cc Italica bike assembled in Mexico from South Korean and Chinese components.
Hey Michael, how much did your bike cost?
$1,000.
Where did you buy it?
Mexico, Campeche.
No problems?
No problems at all. No, it's doing pretty good, this baby.
And where you heading?
Going to Buenos Aires is gonna be my final destination. Yeah.
So you've done 17,000 kilometers. Yeah.
Lleva más por si acaso. Después, a mí, yo no lo necesito, tengo mucho. Ahí, pero ahí tienen más de esas cosas cuadradas, más repuestos de esos pequeñitos.
Sí, sí.
Sí, llévalos todos, no en eso.
Sí, ay, a ti. Tengo mucho.
Ya sabes que con eso puedes arreglar una motocicleta china.
They accept all sorts and nobody judges at this hostel. The last guy had a Suzuki 650. Michael's got a Chinese Mexican 150cc. And they're not going a short distance either. Thousands of kilometres. I get the impression that Chris looked upon Mike as a kind of father-son relationship.
This comes off every day. It does? Yeah.
You see there, Enzo's holding the big Afghan dog so he doesn't run off and chase him. Looking at Mike's wheels, they're cast aluminium. He wouldn't have any problems with spokes, but I've heard that when they break, they really break. I don't know. But it's good to know that I'm not the only person doing it on a cheap bike. He's only cost $1,000, and it's only a 150. And he's done 17,000 kilometres, all the way from Mexico. As we say in Australia, good on you, mate. Now this is Chris and his bike. It was a BMW, but it was a very unusual one. It was unusual because it came from the factory with a Rotax single-cylinder engine, and it was the first BMW to have a chain drive. He also had this additional fuel tank that automatically fed into the main tank so he could get more range. Now, being an ex-military man, there was no BS coming out of his mouth, straight to the point. He did ride a BMW, but look at the windshield. There was no middle-class pretentiousness with this guy. Now, while on the theme of fathers, Chris, who is an American military vet, was on a mission for his late father. I think it's best if I let him explain the story in his own words.
They go with me almost everywhere whenever I ride my bike. He is with me.
Tell us about that, Chris. What's that?
Sure. This is a vial that I made out of lepidolite. It's actually hollow. And it's made out of a soft stone that was pretty easy to hollow out and drill out. And inside this are my father's ashes, which I plan on putting in a tide pool on the south shore of Tierra del Fuego, along with some other knickknacks from just every country that I've been through, between New Mexico and final destination. I still have Argentina to go. This ride is dedicated to him. He wrote me a letter the day that he was actually in an accident that took his life, and he was on a motorcycle. And in the letter he said he was looking for a ferry to Cartagena from Limon, Costa Rica, and that his eventual destination was Tierra del Fuego. So many years later, I'm wondering why I still had these ashes and what I was going to do with my life, what gave me meaning and purpose. And I suddenly realized that fulfilling my father's mission, his ride, was something that would give me meaning. And I've been on this journey now for 3 months. Having a great time, mostly, if you consider having a great time being beat up by the road, spending lots of time on a bike and listening to a single-cylinder engine in your head for 8 hours a day. But I really have had a great time, and we're getting close to the end here, and I'm hanging in Chile, in Valparaiso, Chile, and this melancholy has crawled on board. I guess the cloudy days all the time have to do with it, and kind of a damper on things, but I dedicate this ride to him and everybody else who's helped me make it. Everybody. And we can at some point get to all your names and I'll put you on my site. But thanks everybody for helping me get this far.
Yeah, and you said you think he's watching over you.
Of course I feel it. My dad has been watching over me. I've had so many instances where there's been some divine intervention that has prevented catastrophe over and over. And I guess that's just been a pattern that I had developed since he had passed away of not taking precautionary measures that most of us take, just in the most simple things. And hopefully these patterns will start to leave me as other healthier patterns emerge. I still ride like there's no tomorrow, and we got to make it there and back. And at this point, I don't know what else to say.
So you're just going to tip them into the ocean down in Patagonia?
Well, yeah, when I first thought of what would be the best place. I mean, once I got south to Tierra del Fuego, where would be good? And so I was thinking that a tide pool, between high and low tide, the little pools of water that form. I was going to find a nice tide pool at low tide, because I figure eventually tide will come in and wash everything back to the sea where it belongs, where everything goes anyway. And along with all the little knickknacks that I got from each country, a little necklace from here, a piece of stone from there, and memorabilia from the trip that basically belong with these ashes in that tide pool. I'm going to try to write a poem, come up with a few words for the occasion and celebrate, I guess,
But soon enough, Chris was leaving too. In true military's fashion, he refers to Tierra del Fuego as TDF or bust.
TDF or bust.
And look at how neatly he packs his bag. And he's got 2 spare tyres. Must come from being in the military, being so neat and well prepared.
Thumbs up. Yeah. TDF or bust.
Don't rush.
When he took off like a rocket. Now, I've lost contact with Chris and his website's no longer up, but I did hear that he did make it down to Terra del Fuego a few weeks later. And I guess for him, it marked the final chapter in his father's life. One American military guy leaves, another arrives. This is Jeff Beecher. He was a mechanical engineer in the US Navy. Now he tutors maths and was a motorcycle safety instructor for a government body. He's just finished a Trans-America's ride and he's in Villa Kunterbunt arranging the transport of his bike. Jim did me a big favour. After I begged him and offered him a good price, he agreed to sell me some of his stuff. First of all, he gave me this buff neck scarf thing and told me how to wear it.
All right, what you have there is a tube that'll help you stay warm when you're riding on the lower temperatures. That's it. Just insert it with the Polartec part on the bottom. You're going to tuck it into the collar of whatever shirt you might be wearing. And there you have your windproof closure.
He also sold me these hippo hands. These ones were extra large ones that went over the Barkbuster knuckle guards. I had never seen them before, but I've been told that they're absolutely fantastic if you're riding in freezing cold weather like they have down in Patagonia. In fact, it was so cold down there, he told me he needed heated grips, 2 sets of gloves, and the hippo hands just to maintain the warmth in his fingers.
You can't do it wrong. There's just some ways that are better than others. Oh, but you're wired here. Can we slide this down the...
He also gave me this neat little tank bag with a transparent map pocket, and you see that little yellow thing? That's a plastic disc that you put down in soft dirt or sand, and you put your side stand foot on it, and it stops you sinking into the sand. And it has a handy string, so you can lift it up without getting off the bike when you go to leave. I also stole one of Kendy's ideas and put a wristwatch right next to the speedometer so I could keep track of time. To keep myself occupied, I decided to make a sort of waterproof plastic cover for my El Cheapo tent, because where I'm headed now, down south in Patagonia, it does rain a lot, and this El Cheapo tent just won't keep me dry. I'm certain of it. I shudder to think, though, how long it's going to last in those super strong winds they have down there. But maybe it'll help. At this particular point in time, I was at a crossroads, worried about my dad. I didn't even have a credit card to be able to buy a ticket and go home, couldn't change my ticket. But on the other hand, Enzo and Martina were excellent hosts. The other bikers there, the camaraderie and support they gave me. You know, I was kind of new to this biking world and biking hostels and the life on the road. But meeting those guys and being with them, it kind of kept me alive, and it opened a door to a lifestyle that I didn't really know existed. So on one hand, I sort of felt worried and stressed, but on the other hand, I felt really happy to know that this world of biking existed and the support that was there. Then, finally, some good news. My stepmother sent me an email saying my father's operation had been a success and the doctors had high hopes he would make a full recovery. I guess I couldn't have asked for better news. They got all the cancer. He's doing well. My thoughts are now turning away from flying back home. So I'm thinking now, if my dad continues to improve, I can still make my run down to Patagonia and fly back on my return ticket later. Then, more good news. Enzo walked in and theatrically made a joke.
Express delivery for Glenn Short.
Finally, it came. My father's handwriting. Yes. Yes! Finally, I've got my financial independence.
Assuming it works.
Well, I've got to unblock it. I blocked it while it was in.
And there inside, in my father's distinctive handwriting, was my replacement credit card. Finally, I felt I could hit the road. But there was some bad news. My supposedly rugged little Pentax, which used to tag GPS on every photo I took, I pulled it out of my bag and it was broken. I don't know how it happened. I don't remember dropping it, but that was that. Another worry was, it was Easter long weekend and I developed a really bad toothache. Enzo said he knew a teaching hospital, but they only did extractions close by. So I got on the internet looking for a dental clinic that might be open over Easter, but the only one I could find was way over in Valparaiso, 100 and something kilometres away. So Enzo just took me to a pharmacy. I bought some strong painkillers. I also had some antibiotics left over from treating my foot when I was in Arica. And the guy did say, it'll probably come back. You need to get it looked at. And you'll find out in a future episode, you pay the price when you rush and you don't look after yourself. But anyway, I'd been here 19 days. Time to hit the road. I'd had a great time here in Valparaiso. I loved the place, but it was time to head south before the snow and the cold weather set in. That's all for this episode, amigos. But coming up in the next episode, we have... I got off to an early start, but there was still a bit of traffic. This is the Malecon and it's beautiful. This is the River Maule, which once ran red with human blood. I wonder if I could camp in there. Actually, this place has a bit of a dark history. I got the tent up just as night was falling.